You're listening to the Magicians Podcast, informal interviews with the biggest names in magic.
In rehearsals, she bent down to put the prediction in the safe, and I said, "Oh, look at the arse on that." She was furious.
Hello everybody, thanks for tuning in and pressing the download button. A really great, fun episode coming up today with Graham Jolley, the mind reader and mentalist. I had to persevere to get this interview. He ignored my first few emails and telephone calls. I'm glad I did persevere, and I'm sure you will be too. He is his usual colourful and vibrant self in this interview, and I think it's one you will remember. Another quick reminder that you can follow us on Twitter and also on Facebook. Twitter is at Magician Podcast, no S, and the Facebook page is just simply called The Magicians Podcast. I'm really enjoying seeing that there's a bit of a conversation going on there, and you guys are discussing the episodes. That's great to see, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot to say about this one too. I wanted to get Graham's complete story, so I started off by asking him about his childhood.
I was brought up by my grandparents, my grandfather. So Dynamo's not the only person to have a grandfather. And we lived in Ealing, West London. And then my grandfather, he was advised by his doctor to go and live on the coast. So we moved to Clapton-on-Sea in Essex. I was sent away to boarding school. But in the holidays, my aunt Mary had a friend, Daphne, whose father was a magician, Sidney Smith, who was quite well known. Daphne said to my Aunt Mary, "What is Graham interested in?" I was about 10. And she said, "Magic." She said, "Oh, my father's a magician." So I met Sidney, and he taught me manipulation. So I love manipulation acts. In fact, Channing Pollock, I think, stole my act, everything about it.
That's right.
And I got this manipulative act together with the help of Sidney. It was also called Paul Duquesne. And I could never understand why I looked the way I did in Tales. And then I looked at Channing Pollock. It was like two different species. I suppose mine wasn't made to measure. I suppose that was the problem. Anyway, I did this manipulation act, and I went in for the Young Magician of the Year competition, actually, with Sidney's help. I was about 16, I think. I was beaten by this young man from Finland, and I want to be rude about him, but I can't. He was absolutely brilliant. Alavi Arexian, I think his name was, and he did the most incredible act. Snooker balls production, about 12 of them. Most manipulators of snooker balls turn sideways after about 3. I always think you're not going to be very impressed if you see a billiard ball manipulator turning sideways, having only produced 1. You should be able to get to 4 without turning to the side. He didn't turn to the side at all. He produced 12 balls straight on. I couldn't understand this. Well, I did eventually, because I was watching him in the wings on the live performance, and I don't think he'd mind me saying they were flying out from his jacket. And you couldn't see them. And as soon as he got them in the palm, he was doing the roll around, and then he would do another one, and he was tossing them in the air and catching them. But it wasn't just juggling; it was really very magical. Anyway, he won, and I was a bit disappointed. But I could have been beaten by Keith Cooper. That would have been a terrible insult.
So, sometimes when young magicians don't win the Young Magician of the Year, it gives them a bit of a knock.
Give it a little bit up. I think in hindsight, I didn't think I would win. I wasn't. It was a nice act. It was typical O-level, hand production, single car production. I did unequal ropes. You can't win a competition like the Young Magician of the Year, can you? Doing unequal ropes. Thimbles, nobody could see the damn things. My assistant, Sid said, "You need an assistant to blow the bubbles." They do. Fred Capps did this wonderful routine where he blew bubbles. Well, the bubbles come out of a champagne bottle in a champagne bucket, and he would catch the bubble and vanish them. I mean, it's not difficult to vanish a bubble. I could never understand that. I don't think he was using some revolutionary pass. But it was a beautiful. And I did that. I couldn't afford a machine to blow bubbles. So Sid said, "Well, get yourself an assistant. I know just the girl." Well, I can't remember her name. She lived in Frinton. I mean, that should have been a good sign because Frinton's a very nice spot, better than Clacton. And she didn't look the part. She wore these high heel shoes about 6 inches. She wore black fishnet tights and the briefest of clothing, and the perfume was absolutely awful. And when she walked on with this bubble liquid, I saw Dennis. Is it Dennis Sprate? Dennis Sprate. I saw his face. He sort of turned to John Young, and they both looked at each other and said, "Oh, what have we got here?" So I think that held me back, my assistant. But it didn't really upset me. I mean, I enjoyed the experience. I remember David Nixon was comparing it, and he was quite a heavy smoker. I don't think that's rude to say that. And he'd run out of cigarettes. And my grandfather, who was with me backstage, saw this and said, "Oh, Mr. Nixon, please have one of mine." He said, "Oh, thank you so much." In fact, my grandfather gave him the whole packet. You always remember that. Every time we have friends around, my grandfather told them about the time he gave David Nixon his cigarette packet. It was a charming story. Anyway, it didn't worry me, but then that I didn't win. But Sydney introduced me to Al Koran. This was in the about 65. Al was at the Pavilion that's outside Clacton Pier. And I sat in the audience with Sydney and Alan Shaxson and Johnny Hart. Johnny Hart was brilliant. I mean, wonderful manipulative act. First time I saw somebody do the single hand car production with both hands. And his car fans were beautiful. They're huge fans. And anyway, we were sitting there and we were watching Al. And I went, after that was on the Monday night. I remember these little details. It was a Monday night. I went to see Al every night after that, the whole week. And on the last night, I remember Al wasn't, although I admired Al, and he was a great influence, he wasn't a tremendously, what you call a showman in the sense of Maurice Vogel. And the audience were quite quiet, but I was cheering and clapping. And the woman next to me said, "Oh, you like this sort of thing?" I said, "Oh, yes." And she said, "I'm his wife." I said, "Oh, Catherine, I think her name was." So she took me backstage to meet Al after the show with Sid. And then Catherine went off to the hotel, I think. And Sid, myself and Al went to the Royal Hotel, Clacton, and we had a drink. And I was about 15 or 16, I think. And Al was really nice to me. I said all the right things like, "Oh, I love your Himba linking finger routine." He said, "Oh, it's a showstopper. It's a showstopper." I said, "Yes, it is." And jackpot coins, I've always liked. "Oh, it's a showstopper. It's a showstopper." I said, "Medallion's very good." He said, "Oh, it's a showstopper." I said, "Well, in other words, everything in your act is a showstopper." He said, "Absolutely." And the snooker balls is a showstopper. He said, "Absolutely." Now, the thing was, on the last night, he couldn't get any volunteers, so I went up. I read the number out on the medallion, I did the snooker balls, and I was responsible for doing the book test. The Himba dictionary, the snooker balls, which I do now, and I also thought of the number for the newspaper prediction with the countdown. You tear out the paper. And I remember on one night, it was awful to watch, but two ladies got up whilst he was tearing the newspaper up. He put the 16 pieces on his hand. Two ladies got up, walked out. A gust of wind came through from Clacton Beach and blew all the pieces of paper all over the stage.
Dear.
Al was very upset. I remember on another night, we were walking out of the theatre, Al was closing the show. He did the whole of the second half, I think. And two ladies, people were discussing Al walking out of the as they were walking out of the theatre. I heard a lady say to another lady, "Oh, it was a good show, wasn't it? What did you think of that Coogan man?" I couldn't help it. I said, "Excuse me, madam, it's not Coogan, it's Al Koran." She said, "Oh, excuse me." They didn't like him, but I think he was too sophisticated. He was a very sophisticated performer, I thought. He had a wonderful appearance, silver hair, and sort of fairly short, immaculately dressed. Wonderful presentation. Then I saw Chan Canasta the same week. He did this on the pier. He did the whole of the second half. And he didn't get one round of applause. Isn't that extraordinary?
Wow.
He did a couple of book tests. He did several card locations. Because he was a television performer.
Right.
He was very much a television performer. I don't think it translates to a large theatre of holidaymakers.
So your 15, 16.
15, 16. Oh, and Al said to me, "What sort of act do you do?" I said, "I do manipulation." I said, "I've just lost the Young Magician of the Year competition to some chap from Finland." And I said, "Keith Cooper and Carol came second. Think how I feel about that." And some chap from South Africa came third. I think I came last, actually. And Al said, "Oh, well, don't worry about it." He said, "Quite frankly, you don't look like a manipulator." I said, "Well, don't I now?" "Oh, that's very sweet of you. What, I look like a bank clerk?" He said, No. You look more like a mentalist. Why don't you do a mind-reading act?" And I always remember that Al was responsible for me to take out mentalism. Well, I didn't take up mentalism straight away. I did a few more shows. But where can you work as a manipulator in a cheap hotel? I mean, I couldn't afford my own tails.
It's the same costume.
It's the same bloody costume. My grandfather said...
Different act.
My grandfather said to me, "I want my tails back just in case I get married again." Because he wasn't getting on too well with his wife, my grandmother. They were arguing a lot. And I think I went into banking. I went straight into banking. I worked in Knightsbridge at a bank called Dalton and Barton for a man called Jack Dalal. He was affectionately called Black Jack Dalal. He was Iraqi. They called him Black Jack Dalal because of his fondness for the casinos and playing cards. And I worked there for several years, and it was then that I gradually developed a mind-reading act. But it wasn't 100% mind-reading. It was like a lot of magicians these days. They go on, they do Torn Store newspaper, cups and balls, linking rings, and then they sort of finish off with a bit of mind-reading. And I hate it. I hate saying this. I want to see a distinction, a firm distinction between mentalism and magic. But who am I? Who am I to say that? I was the same. I didn't have the confidence to do 100% mind reading. I did nudist deck and Popeye Pips, Chase the Ace, thing with 3 large cards. David Nixon used to do it. And then I do some confabulation type things. Some awful trick called Just Chance with a wooden tray. I mean, how did I get away with it? And then finish off with mentalism. But I found that the mentalism really suited me. And then by the time I was about 24, it was 100% mentalism. And I moved from Dalton and Barton, the bank, and I think I went to Barclays DCO in Gracechurch Street, near Lombard Street. And I did one of the girls said, "You're a magician, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." And we got a Christmas party coming up. Do you want to do the cabaret? I said, yes, of course. And I did it. But it went well. It was a mind reading act. And the bank manager called me in the next day, sat me down and said, "Jolley, that's very, very good." He said, "I wouldn't have thought you were the sort." "Oh, there you are. You never know about people, do you, sir?" He said, "Ever thought of doing it for a living?" I said, quite an indirect way of asking me to leave. I said, "Well, no." I said, "I haven't really." He said, "Well, give it a try, Jolley, give it a try. Because I see you're not bothering with your Institute of Bankers exams." Well, I wasn't interested in the Institute of Bankers exams. General principles of law, accountancy, oh dear, no thank you. So about 6 months later, I saw an advert in the stage newspaper, the theatrical newspaper. It says, "Looking for acts to work on the QE2. This was in the early 70s. And I went off. I used to do months and months and months on the ships. I used to cross paths with Robert Harburn. He was a lovely man on the cruise ships. And Alan Shaxson. And I did the cruising, I did a bit of cruising for about 5 years. And then I think it was 1980, a very good friend of mine, Brian Russell, who ran a theatrical agency in Norwich Artists, said to me, "Graham," he said, "I got a show for Amico Oil at Sproulston Hall, just outside Norwich." Sproulston Hall is a beautiful country house. I think it belonged to the Barclays family. Barclays Bank family, and I did this show for about 100 businessmen sitting around a table. They'd had dinner, and I went on it and did it out, and I thought, "Oh, this is more like it." I really enjoyed it.
So you hadn't been enjoying the cruises?
I did, but I didn't see much future in it, I did enjoy it, but the money at the time wasn't very good, and I thought, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And then I was introduced to this show for Amico Oil. They'd had Ad Afternoon as speaker before me, a motivational speaker, Well, the audience had fallen asleep. You know, and he was a motivational speaker. And some awful retired footballer who got up. He's obviously been primed to give a talk and relate it to team leadership. So he said things like, I was with Sir Alf Ramsey, who was the manager of the England football team in 1966, and at the last minute he took out Nobby Stiles and put in Geoff Hurst. Now that's leadership for you. And then you see what a link. I mean, was it leadership? No, it was just changing the team. Like he'd obviously been primed. So you've got to gear your lecture to leadership. Anyway, I felt sorry for the audience because they weren't really enjoying this. You know, okay, he scored the winning goal in 1966, but you know, I always get annoyed with these sportsmen who get up at dinners. I mean, they're not really entertainers, are they? They're sportsmen.
Yeah. And
they're. I used to think at the time they were taking away work from comedians.
They all say the same thing as well.
They say the same things, and as I said, in a frivolous way, their talk is, and that gentleman is leadership.
Yeah.
It's not. No. I went on and I did about an hour, and it was great. And an advertising executive man came up to me and said, "Have you got a card?" And I was young; I hadn't got a proper card or a brochure. And he said, "Oh, you need a brochure." And this guy, he lived in Bristol, I remember. He said, I'll design you a brochure and a business card. And he did it, and he did it for nothing. And I thought that was incredibly kind, actually. And I got this brochure. Actually, looking at it now, I've still got a copy. I hate it.
Oh, really?
It had those wavy lines like that, which is supposed to look like brainwave patterns.
Oh, yeah.
It's very 70s, isn't it?
You're not still using this?
Oh, no. No, it puts me to sleep. It makes you dizzy, you know. It's like when you're having gas and you see the lines going across. Oh, it's horrible. But it was a wonderful... Fred Larn, his name was. Fred Larn. He's no longer with us. Nothing to do with the brochure. I mean... But he got me going on the corporate field, and then gradually I got into this entertaining at business functions. People look down and they say, "Oh, he's a corporate entertainer." I think it's a wonderful branch of the entertainment business. Where else are you going to work this day and age?
So it grew quite quickly, did it? Or you just...
Yeah, very quickly. I said to Brian Russell, who booked me, he rang me up the next day and said, "How did it go?" I said, "Well, haven't you checked with the client?" He said, "I have." I said, "Well, why ask me? Doesn't matter what I say or whatever, I'm always going to say I was brilliant, marvellous, handed out 10 cards, you know." I said, "It went brilliantly." He said, "Well, I got some more for you." No, mostly in London. I was living in Norwich then, and I was travelling backwards and forwards to London and doing the shows for these corporate events, which I'm still doing. Do you know, I'm 70, I'll be 70 this year, and people say to me, "Graham, why don't you pack up, retire, spend more time with the family?" I don't want to spend more time with the family. I've had enough of them. I don't. The thought of spending more time with my family terrifies me. I mean, there's a woman 2 or 3 doors down the road. I wouldn't mind spending a bit of time with her. But she's nearly as old as I am, and you know, nothing helps now. Nothing helps. So here I am, and
so we on one of the earlier episodes of this podcast, and we were talking about. It was Faye Presto was talking about magicians who have really made a living as a stage performer, solely as a stage performer, and that's you. You were the only name that came up, really. Has it been a struggle at times to, you know, has there been ups and downs? You've done it for a long time, so you must have seen the industry change of after dinner entertainment.
Yeah, well, it was a struggle at first. It's not I'm busy still. Well, as busy as a man of my age wants to be. But I remember at the beginning, yes, it was a struggle. I had a bedsitter in Notting Hill Gate. It was only about £5 a week. And there were some weeks, well, this is like late 60s, early 70s, there were some weeks where I couldn't pay my rent. But the landlady was very nice. She was ugly, but she was very nice. And she said, "Where's your rent? You haven't paid your rent for 2 months." I said, "I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of a quiet time. I've just got an agent." And she said, "Well, you're going to have to come to some sort of understanding, Graham." So we did come to an understanding, and I didn't have to pay the rent for 2 or 3 months. I don't think I have to go into any details, but I wasn't enjoying it, quite frankly, Richard. She wasn't my type of woman. And I remember, I thought, how am I going to get the money together? I did get the money together, and I knocked on her door, and she said, "Oh, come in, darling. Call me darling, you know." I said, "Look, could we revert back to the original arrangement whereby I actually pay the rent?" She said, "Well, don't you want to carry on as we are? I thought you were happy." I said, "Well, I am happy, but I don't think it's right." I mean, and that was it. So I was there. It was a long time ago. It has things have changed. I think you've got to. Although I make a living just doing the corporate work, I think you're a bit more flexible now. You do dinner parties, going around to people's houses, and I mean, I love. And maybe a month a year on the cruise liners. Try and avoid television. Well, I mean, television's avoided me, so it's a very nice arrangement. I don't do anything for them, and they don't do anything for me. So
that's not true. My very first time I ever saw you was when I don't know how many years ago it was, but there was a TV show called Talking Telephone Numbers.
Oh yeah,
and you were one of the only acts that were on 2 weeks running. They brought you in the first week. You made a prediction. And then you came back the following week and you revealed it. Yeah. It was in a big safe. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I went on the first time, and I remember I did a little routine. It's on YouTube where I had about 10 people in a row, and I read each person's mind. I don't know if anybody remembers the program, but you had to generate a number, a single-digit number. And Wayne Dobson actually got, because Wayne went on and did the 10-card trick, which I think David Williamson did. You know. He said, "Why don't you go on it?" I said, "Well, I don't want to do that program. I'd seen it, but I should go on it." Anyway, I did it, and I had these 9 people in a row, and they went very well. And then they rang me up and said, "Would you like to come back next week?" And I did this prediction in the safe, and it went away. Safe was taken away, and came back and did that. Then I did a third one. Telephone numbers. And then they offered me a TV series. This was Cellar Door. We'd like to do something with you, and we went into rehearsals. I had script writers. I didn't need a script writer. A man called John Alexander, I think, or was it Alexander? I think he had, his surname was the same as his Christian name, so I think it's awfully lazy, like John or Alexander. And he wrote me these scripts. He wrote me an Anthea Turner joke. I can't remember it now, but it wasn't funny. And I said, "Do you think I could just replace them with they?" He said, "Look, Graham, read it as it is. If you don't do that, it's not funny." I said, No, you're wrong. You can't put the there. It's got to be they. It's got no rhythm. He said, "Graham, I'm a professional scriptwriter. I know." I said, "Well, the joke doesn't suit me." And then he wrote me another joke. And I just couldn't deliver any of his lines because I just like to make it up as I go along. In fact, I upset Forbes, what's the name of the compound, that woman? Emma Forbes. I upset her. In rehearsals, she bent down to put the prediction in the safe, and I said, "Oh, look at the arse on that." She was furious, absolutely furious. She went running after the producer, said, "Oh, I'm not working with him. He keeps ad-libbing. He's referred to a part of my body." And the producer, Tony Nicholson, I think it was, I said, "Well, that's just Graham. That's the way he is. He's a bit ridiculous. So you just got to put up with him." But she said, "Well, I'm not putting up with it at all. Anyway, we managed to get through the program. I mean, I upset her again at the end of the program. I said, "It's lovely working with you. Do you think you could ever love an older man?" She said, "Well, there you go again. You're so silly." I mean, John Fisher's the same. He can't stand my sense of humour. I remember I did. I was doing the Magic Circle Supper. I can't be that bad, can I? I've done it 3 times. Right. And he's sitting in the front row, Fisher. I call him Fisher. And I mean, there's no hatred there, no contempt, but he was there with his wife. Charming woman. I don't know what they see in each other. And he's sitting there with Anita Harris, who's a lovely woman. She's gorgeous, with her husband. And I was doing the middle of my act. I was doing the snooker balls. That's all I've got, really, isn't it? I was doing the snooker balls. And on the same table, it wasn't Anita Harris, there was another woman. I was in the middle of the snooker balls. I said, "Do you have the red ball?" "Yes." The woman on John Fisher's table had a little bit of flatulence. The great wind. I know it was. I can recognise it. I can recognise it anywhere. And I looked at her and I said, "Can you make that noise with your mouth?" Well, John Fisher looked at Anita Harris, rolled his eyes to the top of his head, which is not easy when you've had a few drinks. With that sort of, "Oh my goodness, how much longer have we got to listen to this sort of nonsense?" And I don't know how I got onto that, but I just wanted to mention John Fisher. Sorry. And that was the night. That was the night that I met Channing Pollock. What a charming man.
Yeah.
I had a word with him. I said, "I saw you on an old video doing the Interlock Thinker production. It wasn't good. A very vulnerable angle there. He said, well, thank you for telling me. I said, well, don't worry about it because you're not doing it anymore, are you? Just thought I'd point it out. And it's actually true. Awful angle. I mean, the only person I can remember doing the interlock finger production, there's two doing it. Sylvan, the Italian, Sylvan, and Tony van Dommelin, a wonderful, I think he was a Dutch magician. And Max Mavingen did it as well, which is surprising for a mentalist. Oh, that reminds me. A couple of years ago, Lloyd, I went Louis de Matos. Charming.
EMC,
I did that. Now, I don't actually like magicians very much. I've got a few friends, don't I? I can't stand magicians. I think they're most weird people. And they always say, I went into magic because I was shy and I look good. And they're saying that sort of what I call faux modesty. I mean, a lot of magicians are very modest, and they've certainly got a lot to be modest about. And I don't like magicians. So I go and do this thing in Portugal for Louis Meadows, and we're sitting around a three-sided table, with all these, about 30 magicians. And I looked around and I thought, I don't like magicians generally. About 30 of them are here, all in one. They're all the magicians I don't like are there in that room. I've got this chap from America called Mead. What's his name? I can't remember his first name. He looks like a bank clerk or a psychic. He looks a bit like a psychologist. Looks like a child psychologist. Sort of man who goes around your house with his little briefcase and whips out his Wilshire test, IQ test, trying to work out how intelligent you are. Who gives a toss? What's the next number? 1, 2, 3. Oh, is it 4? No, it's 7. No, because of some linguistic sort of trick. But some people just aren't interested in those sort of things. Now, you go off and buy a book from Smith's, how to get through those tests, and as long as it tells you how to approach them, you can get an IQ of 150. It doesn't mean a thing.
What modern magic do you like? Modern magic? Are there any magicians that you do like, or how about sort of magic on TV these days? Is there anything you do like?
I hate magic on television. I won't watch it. But you're probably going to say, well, how do you know how do you know you don't like it if you don't watch it? I watch a few minutes because I give it a chance. I like watching magic. I mean, when I've done a show, I get home at 3 o'clock in the morning. I pour myself a scotch, and there's a television program, Magic, which my wife or my dear son Lloyd has recorded. And I thought, I'll just switch this on. What do I see? Warning: strong language and strong sexual content. This is a bloody magic program. My wife hears the words, she's upstairs, and she hears the words strong sexual content. So she's wondering what I'm watching. So she shouts down, she said, "Are you watching adult movies again?" I said, "Yes, darling." She said, "Well, thank goodness for that. I thought you were watching a magic show." Do you know what strikes me is about television magic now? It's not entertaining. It looks like a series of lateral thinking questions. How's that done? And there's this feeling that if it's a good trick, that's all you need. The magic will stand by itself. I don't agree. It needs humour, presentation, charisma, style, and A.A. Gill, I think he's television critic in the Sunday Times, wrote recently, television magic is the least mysterious branch of the entertainment business. There's just no mystery anymore. I'd rather watch Robert Harbin do Zigzag Illusion live at the Palladium. That's mysterious. I prefer to watch Robert Harbin doing his Tolman Store newspaper, or Robert Harbin doing his cigarette production, or Robert Harbin doing his rope restoration routine. I'll do that again. It's mysterious. It's wonderful.
You're not even enthused that, Catherine Mills is on TV now.
I don't like her. I don't like her. Several years ago, she's got nice hair, but several years ago I was doing a show in London, and she came in and sat down in front of me just after I started. And she got her phone out, she started fiddling on her phone. Not just quickly. I could understand if somebody rang up and say, "The cat's ill." Oh, better answer that. Oh no, there she was. I was on there doing all my stuff, and for 15 minutes she just went like that on her thing. Darren Brown did the same to me. I remember, it was about 10, 15, maybe 15 years ago. A group of us magicians went to watch Mark Salem in Hampstead, and afterwards we had a meal. I had Darren on my left, and he was playing with his phone under the table all the time. I thought to myself, well, maybe he doesn't think I'm very interesting. I said a few things. I said, if anybody thinks I'm not interesting, they've got a problem. And I think it was his phone he was playing with. I don't know. And it was I never forget. It was pouring with rain. Absolutely pouring with rain. I know that Darren was in London to do some recording, and he didn't drive. I don't think he drove or something, and I know he was staying locally. And people were walking into the restaurant with mats and umbrellas, it's pouring rain. And I said, would you like a lift? And he looked at me and he said, why? I said, pardon? Well, you're not very perceptive, are you, for a mentalist? I said, it's raining. I suppose this is sort of mind control, isn't it? Like questioning everything you say. Why do you want to know? I said, I just wanted to stop you getting wet, that's all. Oh, well, and then that was the end of that conversation. I talked to Mark Paul. I mean, he was more interesting. You know what a double person he is. Do you know, I found Mark Paul more interesting than Darren Brown. Oh, really? God, I don't know why. But I think it was the contrast. At least Mark Paul spoke. And then Darren Brown writes to me several years ago and complains that I'm doing the magic square. Well, I can't blame Darren for that. I think I must have done it with some magicians in the audience. They saw me do it without asking for the number. Without asking for the number. I was doing the magic square without asking for the number way back in the early 90s. In fact, I did it on Peppermill with Judy Spears. You asked Judy Spears. Well, she's left Peppermill now. She's living in Devon, I think. She's on the radio more. And I think somebody said, oh, Darren, Jolley's pinched your Magic Square routine. So he wrote to me. I mean, very respectful, very nice. This is a very difficult email, but I hear you're doing my Magic Square routine. And I wrote back and explained the situation, how my son Lloyd, who was only 10 or 11 or 12 at the time, was travelling around with me, and we had this system of finding out what the number was without asking for it. It was very long-winded with electronics and earpieces and all that sort of thing. I was doing it years ago. But you know what annoyed me? Darren didn't even reply to my email. I suppose that's sort of saying to me, well, I've read your email, it doesn't really require answering. I thought it was very rude. I suppose if I ever see him, he'll say he never got it. But his mate, what's his name, Jerry Sarowitz, he got upset with me when I did Penn and Teller. He said, oh, you've taken my joke, thank you for that round of applause. Remove it from your act immediately. I said, orders will be obeyed at all times. Blimey, don't mention the war. And he said, remove it completely now. I wrote him, I said, I've never seen your act. Do you think there's anything in your act that I would take, apart from the bit of string hanging out of your flies, which you love doing? And, oh, vulgar, no wonder he doesn't want magicians to watch him. God.
We're going to let Mr. Jolley catch his breath. There is more to come from him very shortly, including, do you remember when he fooled Penn and Teller on ITV1 and the prize was for him to go to Vegas to open the show for them? Well, it never happened, and he's going to tell us all about that very shortly. But before we go back to Graham, I need to talk to you quickly about Gigio. Gigio is a web-based software designed for professional entertainers. It takes all of the stress out of admin. You can manage your inquiries through it, you can generate PDF contracts, you can generate invoices, you can even track your payments. The software is quick to set up, it's really easy to use. I've been using it for 6 months now and my life has never been easier in the office. Read what others are saying about it and take a free 30-day trial at gigio.co.uk. That's Gigio spelled gigio.co.uk. Let's now go back to Graham Jolley when I ask him about Penn and Teller Fool Us. So tell me about Penn and Teller Fool Us. You were one of the people who fooled them, but also you were the only person to do 2 tricks on 2 full routines you did. What was the thought process behind that?
Yes, I wanted to do I decided in the end that if I did the programme, I wanted to do something from my act so that people, bookers perhaps, would see me and say, here is a chap with an act, a stand-up performer. But I wasn't sure. I mean, I didn't think the snooker ball thing would fool them. It wouldn't fool them. Well, there's a side comment here. It's amazing how people, these kids on YouTube talk about things. Nobody seems to know. I saw. He's got his mate in the audience handing him signals. He's got the logo on the screen behind with all these different coloured balls which they had are moving in a certain order. Strange. So I thought that was strange. Such an old thing is quite new now. I did a card. I thought, how am I going to fool them? Now it's no good because it was very important to me that I gave the impression of that I fooled them. I don't know if I did fool them. I think it's a partial fooling. I thought it was very difficult to say we're not fooled because I would then say to them, Okay, how's it done? Here's the pack of cards, show me. And they wouldn't be able to, because they could say it was mathematical. But it is, I suppose. I suppose it's mathematical. But then I would say, oh, we're not fooled, Graham. We think it's mathematical. We're not fooled. Thank you very much. I would say, well, these are very serious allegations. I'm going to have to get legal counsel. And then Jonathan Ross would say, well, we're going to talk to the guy upstairs on the earpiece, who's the adjudicator. And I would have then said, well, it's no good asking him, because it was Johnny Thompson. It's no good asking him. He's a dove act. What would he know? If they say it's mathematical, I would then say, oh, what's the formula? I'm no good at maths, but normally there's a formula, isn't there? Oh, we don't know the formula. I said, well, can you do it? And they said, no. I said, well, then you're fooled, because it's difficult to define whether you're fooled or not. If you see a levitation and you reveal what you think it is, that's clear. But if you say it's mathematical is invisible, isn't it? It's an abstract concept. So I thought I was covered, but I thought I was. Anyway, I didn't have to worry about that, because they said, can we have a look at the cards? And they could. I think they know very well that they could have looked at the cards, but they gave them an escape route to say, oh, we thought there was a bank of cards. Oh, there isn't. Oh, well, we're fooled. I think there's a lot of acting there. You know that French guy with the spread cards, the blank cards?
Matthew Beach.
Yes. Now they said, we want to look in the box. And he held it up and it said, no. They knew, Penn and Teller knew very well there wasn't anything in that box. They just needed a way of saying, in that case we're fooled. I mean, I say we are assuming that Matthew Beach had anticipated they would say that, which I think is unlikely. So there we are.
So tell me about obviously you did fool them, and how was the prize? Because it never got a second series. How was the trip to Vegas and performing?
I didn't go. I'd already been with my wife and son, and I'd spoken to a couple of other people who had been, and they put you on an economy flight to Vegas. Nobody meets you. I don't think they put you to get your own taxi. They put you up in a Howard Johnson hotel. They give you $200. Well, that's no good, is it? Can't even get a massage. And you don't open the show, which sounds rather gross. It sounds good, doesn't it, opening the show, but you don't. You close the show. I believe, I must be careful what I say here, and I am open, your worship, to correction. No further questions, Your Honour. I believe you close it after their show's finished. So they've done their show, and then Penn comes out and says, well, I hope you've enjoyed it. Oh, by the way, we've just done a programme in England where these magicians come on, and we've got one of them here. So if you want to see him, you can, otherwise, go. I get a feeling it was a bit like that. So you could have found yourself walking on with people putting their coat on. I don't know. But they didn't do a second series. So what was the point of going? Because they were going to film you and then show you at the beginning of the next series. So the television company, after I'd done the programme, they hadn't decided that they weren't going to make another series at that time. They thought they were. They kept ringing me up and saying, because at first I was open to going, but they rang me up a few weeks afterwards and said, can you go, I can't remember the exact dates, but say, can you go the 1st of June to Vegas? I said, yes. And then they ring up a little bit later and say, oh, I can't, Penn and Teller have got a special they're doing. I said, oh, okay. Can you do the 12th of July? I said, yes. And then later on, nearer the date, they ring up and say, oh, sorry, it's some celebration in America. 4th of July, something like that. Can't do it, all right. Can you do this date? I said, yes. No, sorry, got to change that. One of them isn't feeling very well. I was like, oh, this went on and on and on. Then it was, can you come next February? I said, no, I can't. I've got to cut my Aunt Mary's lawn. And she said, oh, don't you want to go? I said, no, I'm sorry, I've lost interest. I've lost it, I'm sorry. She said, well, we will pay you then. They paid me a fee. I think they gave me £2,000. I think it was £2,000 because I didn't go. I thought it was very nice of them. They said, don't talk about it. Just don't say anything because it doesn't look good for the television business. So I waited for the cheque to clear, and I told everybody.
Tell me a little bit about your relationship with the Magic Circle. You've been.
Oh, Magic Circle's marvellous. I was so after the Young Magician of the Year competition, I think part of the prize was you became a member. Oh, it was funny. Before I was a member, I was living near Colchester in Essex, and I was 13, 14. I was doing shows, and I was telling people I was a member of the Magic Circle because I wasn't. I got a letter once, a very polite letter from John Solis, saying, "Oh, it has been brought to our attention, Mr. Jolley, that you are purporting to be a member of the Magic Circle. In the Magic Circle, the Gold Star." According to our records, this is unfounded. May I have your comments? So I wrote back and I said, "Dear Mr. Solis, thank you very much for your kind letter. To be absolutely honest with you, I do not claim to be a member of the Magic Circle, certainly not Gold Star, MIMC, but if people assume I am a member of the Inner Magic Circle, I let them think it. I understand that this is not correct, it's not appropriate behaviour, and I apologise for it. But I must state that I do not actively advertise myself as a member." John Sleece, bless him, wrote back and said, "Dear Mr. Jolley, may I thank you for your letter and your general tone and spirit. It seems to me that you would be a valued member of the Magic Circle." And I can't remember how old I was. Did you have to be 18 to become a member?
I think so.
Maybe I was about 17, 18. May I suggest, Mr. Jolley, that you do become a member of the Magic Circle? I think we would have a lot to offer you, and I think you would have a lot to offer us. So I did, and that was it. And I've had a very, very pleasant relationship ever since. I was very fond of course, Francis White. He was a wonderful sort of gentleman. But all the presidents have been great. I'm not sure about Scott Penrose. But he's given me this lovely jar for our Koran prediction. So
Scott was in here a few minutes before the podcast started, giving Graham the most beautiful prop, which is... Has Scott's made this all for you? Or
yes, well, he's got the jars. It's for an Al Koran prediction using it's a Kilner jar, which was in Alan Shaxson's most wonderful book, which has just come out, which I bought. I highly recommend it. Alan Shaxson was a wonderful performer. It mentions in the book, he started his career, Alan Shaxson, doing a summer season at Walton-on-Naze back in the 60s with Anne, and I was a 12-year-old lad, and I went to see him, and I went in for the talent competition in the interval, and that's where I first met them, and he was very nice to me. Oh, he was wonderful. Immaculate. Well, he always was immaculate, but in those days, black hair, very slickly groomed, tails, top hat, used to walk on with a cane, cigarette in a holder, made it vanish, did the nudist deck, hydrostatic glass, this gasometer, confabulation. It was wonderful. And to me, Alan Shaxson was the perfect magician. Oh. Anyway, that's how I've got this jar.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen this before, but it would fool me very badly.
Yes.
Beautiful idea. And this is what I love to see, is that your act is, as everyone has seen it, is so strong, but you're still working on new things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love actually, although I don't do it professionally, I love close-up magic. I adore close-up magic. I think it's the most wonderful branch of magic. And people say, well, who do you like? And I got a thing about Brother John Hammond. Now, when it comes to mentalism, it's Al Koran. When it comes to close-up, it's Brother John Hammond, Paul Gertner,
yeah,
and a man called David Harkey. David Harkey. I believe he's a pharmacist, actually. I think Dynamo likes him. He's done a few of David Harkey's routines. I tell you who really upset me a few years ago. David Harkey, I think he produced a DVD or a book. And Michael Close said in Magic Magazine, I think it was Magic Magazine, that he didn't like the material, he didn't think it was very deceptive, and he didn't think it would fool anybody. Well, I've seen David Harkey work doing these routines, and it was magnificent. I mean, Michael Close is a very fine performer, but I think he can be a bit harsh sometimes. A bit harsh. I know he didn't... Oh, well, he was doing the music, I remember, at the Blackpool Convention about 5 or 6 years ago, and he was very nice then. He was smiling and all that. Oh, I did Blackpool this year.
I was just about to ask you about that. I was there, you were given an award, and then you...
Yes.
What was it like? 3,000 magicians?
Well, I did it 5 or 6 years ago, the very same show, and it went beautifully. But this one this year didn't. You know why? Because I've been given an award for comedy. and then I'm introduced.
Right.
You cannot give somebody who's not really a comedian. I know I'm funny, I suppose, eccentric sort of humour, but I don't always use it. I don't go out there with the intention of making the audience laugh. I go out there to do my mind reading act. Contrary to what a lot of magicians think, the general public think of me as a mentalist who happens to be funny. If you listen to comments that I do after one of my shows, I don't hear people say, "Oh, I love that story he did about his wife," and "Oh, that was very funny about his mother-in-law." Oh, and when he said that he had a very close marriage and that he and his wife shared a sense of humour, which is just as well because she hasn't got one. Oh, I laughed. I did. No, I don't hear anybody. Well, maybe cynics will say, well, maybe that's because they don't find you very funny. But no, the cynics are wrong. That's not what they're thinking. They talk about the mind reading. How did he know this? How did he do that? And I guess it's very entertaining too, wasn't it? Which is a very pleasant change. So it isn't the comedy which strikes people. So I'm introduced by someone called Ken Dodd, who didn't know who I was. I was getting ready. I was backstage. I didn't know I was getting an award. I had about 20 minutes to go, and I had my trousers down. I had my trousers down backstage because I was having a bit of trouble with my catheter because I've had awful prostate problems lately. I was adjusting my equipment, and he comes in. Ken Dodd, stop it. I've had the operation now. I think it's called TERPS. I can't ejaculate properly. I don't know. It goes backwards. I don't know if I'm coming and going. I don't have an orgasm anymore. It's terribly sad. Anyway, I've had a word with Mandy, and she said, "Oh, I'm sure we can help." And Elizabeth Warlock says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She says, "You've got the body of a man twice your age." I said, "Thank you, Elizabeth." Now, I'm there. I'm adjusting my trousers, and it's awful. I thought I've got. Who's that juggler from America? Who's just about to go on? Birdie Fry.
Charlie
Fry. I love his wife. Oh, she's an exotic creature. Very underestimated. I'm getting ready, and then Ken Dodd walks in. He said, "Oh, hello. I've just put up my trousers at the stage, and my braces are on." He said, "Who are you?" I said, "Graham Jolley." He said, "Oh, what do you do? You're a solicitor?" I said, "No, I'm not a solicitor. I'm on the show." He said, "You look like a solicitor." I said, "No, thanks. No, not interested in that sort of thing." He goes on and does about 20 minutes. I'm completely oblivious to the fact that I'm going to get an award in it. And then he says...
so you didn't know about it?
I didn't know it. I got my trousers down. I keep on. I know I keep on about my trousers, but someone's got to talk about me. He says, he does it 20 minutes. And he said, "All right, well, and now we have the Ken Dodd Award." And he opens this envelope. And he reads it, and the Ken Dodd Award, I would have thought he would have known it's his award, but apparently he doesn't know anything about the winner. He opens his envelope and says, and the winner of the Ken Dodd Award this year is Graham Jolley. Now, he doesn't know who's going to walk out because he's already met me and he didn't know who I was. I walk out and said, "Oh, it's you," he says. "Ken, what an introduction."
Nice.
"Oh, I thought you were the solicitor." I said, "No." He said, "Oh, well, congratulations." He said, "Jolley, what's a nice name." I said, "Oh, thank you, yes." And I walked off. And then he did a few more jokes and said, "Okay, and now we're going to see a bit more of Graham Jolley. He's just won the Ken Dodd Comedy Award. Here he is." So I got the feeling, I've just got the award for comedy. I better be ultra funny. It's no good. My humour sort of seeps in like osmosis, very slowly. You know.
Well, the humour is a bit of an internal dialogue, right? When you go,
It
"Hello,
is.
sir, would you help me?" Try and take an interest.
Try and take an interest.
Where's the idea of that coming from? If you have an internal monologue that you do say out loud, it's almost like you're oblivious to the fact that you do that.
I started off doing my mind reading act, didn't I, Lloyd, by just doing it straight, like most mentalists. It went quite well. But I used to get irritable with people if things went slightly wrong. And then I think of a number between 1 and 10. What is it? 43. I think, well, and the audience would find that very amusing. And then gradually I thought, oh, I've got to say something. I can't be rude. I can't be rude to them. I'll say things like, "Have I come to the right function? Is this the Mensa way daybreak or the home for the bewildered?" Or I'd say, "Do you live near a mobile phone mast?" Meaning that the electrical current has upset their brain. Or if anybody offers you a penny for your thoughts, sell. Things like that. And they loved all that, especially businessmen. Certain professions love that sort of humour. I gradually built on that. But I didn't start off like that. Funny though, David Birdglass was the first person who got me thinking about that sort of humour. I wouldn't call it put down humour, but it's slightly controlling. I saw him. I used to be back in the 70s. I was the entertainment secretary for the LSM, London Society of Magicians. I put on 3 shows, and one of the shows was really marvellous. The other 2 weren't so hot, but the first one was great. We had Finn John, Finn John was brilliant. He did that lovely floating ball.
Yeah.
He doesn't do it anymore. He does it with a tie. It doesn't look so good. No. Then we had Finn John, a chap called Rolando. We had Michael Vine. Oh, what an act! It's a good thing he gave up. Chris North and Jill, they were all right. And David Burglass. I think I was compere. They had a bongo, and David Burglass did the whole of the second half. He was absolutely brilliant. And they used to have a silver collection. They never collected so much. I did that 3 times, and I can't really remember, Richard, why I've started on that story. There I was. Anyway, I was the entertainment secretary of the LSM. Frank Boynett, he was a lovely
Talking
man.
about the internal monologue of the comedy.
Oh, yes. Oh, well, that's right. David Burglass did something that night, which I've always remembered. He got a guy up and he said, point to someone in the audience, would you? And you do that. He pointed to them, and he immediately took hold of their wrist and pushed their hand down and said, don't do that, it's rude. I thought, well. And the audience didn't actually go into fits of laughter, but they found it slightly amusing. It depends on who you pick on. If you pick on the managing director and say, point to somebody, don't do that, it's rude. It's quite funny. That's what started me off.
Yeah.
I've often told David that. He usually falls asleep.
The show that you do, that you're known for, that sort of 30-40 minutes of relentless mentalism, mind reading comedy. I really always wanted to ask is what is your favourite part of that show? What bit is it that you really enjoy?
Well, I am very fond of the snooker ball routine,
Yeah.
which I know I didn't go on television much lately. But if I do get asked, I have to do that. I suppose people think I haven't got anything else, but I have. I mean, my act when I do corporate work is normally about an hour, so I have a lot of material. But I don't like. I try to stop. I try to cut out pre-show work. We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? Pre-show work. I can't. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just feel uncomfortable with it.
Right.
Do you know what it's like? I think pre-show work and stooges and instant stooges is a bit like taking Viagra and not telling your wife or your girlfriend or partner. She God, that was marvellous, Graham. Marvellous. But you've taken something. So I think pre-show work and stooges, it obviously makes you look better than you really are. Well, you could argue, well, that's the idea, to make yourself look better than you are. Yes, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I feel uncomfortable using it. Now, if I was on a programme and I had the opportunity to use pre-show work, instant stooges, I would use it myself. All I'm saying is I don't like seeing other people do it, which is pretty hypocritical, isn't it? I'll tell you a thing I can't stand at the moment. I like the distinction between mentalism and magic. In the old days, and I am 70, so I can look back at the old days. In the old days, there was this distinct distinction, wasn't there? In fact, mentalism was the poor cousin to magic, wasn't it? It was considered rather dull and boring. And actually, it is boring and dull, actually, unless you've got a certain type of personality. But now it's been, I think the influence of the effect of mentalism being weakened by this association with psychology, NLP, body language.
Because to a certain generation, that's all we know it as, is it having associated with psychology, but it hasn't always been that way.
No, for years, I don't know when mentalism started. I suppose, mentalism, spiritualism, all that sort of psychic business goes back maybe 100 years or more. Anna Fay, is it Anna Fay, and all that. It goes back a long time, but modern mentalism, I suppose it's Dunninger, isn't it? Alexander and Kreskin. They sold themselves as a mind reading acts. Mm-hmm. I suppose the thinking is, well, if you say it's lots of different things, no one's going to challenge you and you're not going to be chased. I think it's a bit feeble. Don't go out there, be a man, say you're a mind reader, take it on the chin. People challenge you.
So you're bored of this constant connection to psychology?
Psychology. I mean, it just reduces mentalism to the level of a psychology. I don't like. I mean, you see, every magician or mentalist is a psychologist. The next thing going to happen is that Richard Wiseman is going to compare Sunday Night at the London Palladium. Not because he's a mentalist or an entertainer or a magician, but because he's got a background in psychology. And Catherine Mills, she hasn't got a background in psychology. She wouldn't sit in front of me playing on her mobile phone for 20 minutes. But she would think to herself, being a psychologist and a sociologist and understanding how people think, she would say to herself, I better not play with this and send texts and make messages because that will put the act off, wouldn't she? Unless she did that deliberately.
Maybe she did.
Didn't she go at Max Somerset? I think she did. I can't think. I mean, what would he see in her?
Graham, we're going to have to wrap this up because the time has just flown by.
Thank you.
This has been so much fun.
Well, I hope it's been fun.
Your characters just...
Because people might listen to this and say, does Jolley mean all this criticising people? Of course, it's up to you to wonder either way. I can assure you that it's just meant to make people laugh. I mean, I get a lot of pleasure listening to magicians run down other magicians and criticise them and say, I saw so-and-so the other day. Everything went wrong. They're suing Labco because this didn't work. I think it's fantastic. But have we got 2 minutes?
Of course, yeah.
This exposure business, I think it's a magician's fault, really. I think it was at the beginning, I think it was around the 2000, 2002, 2003. The Channel 4 did a programme about secrets of psychics exposed. And a group of magicians, respectable magicians, very nice chaps, ran through Uri Geller's act. They explained how, well, let's assume, for instance, that Uri Geller is not psychic. So what's the alternative? Well, obviously, it's a fraud. You don't need a degree in logic for that. So as I say, Uri Geller is a fraud. And he moves a compass needle. These magicians were upset because he didn't admit it was a trick. Well, if you move a compass needle and say, you've got to say it's psychic. If you bend a key, you've got to say it's psychic power. Well, you've got to use the word power. Because if you don't, it's very easy to know what's going on. It's not difficult to think of a way of moving a compass needle. But if you say it's psychic power, people say, maybe he's got something. Richard Dawkins, interesting man. Richard Dawkins, the evolutionist, biologist, surprises me for a man of such intelligence. Says in one of his books, if only Uri Geller had admitted he was a magician, I would have been his biggest fan. Well, what a naive, a ridiculous thing to say. If Uri Geller had bent keys, fixed watches, moved a compass needle, and then said, it's all a magic trick, Uri would be living not in Sonning, in Reading, but would be living in Bognor Regis in a 2-bedroom flat. He had to call it psychic because he was doing physical things. You can't say, I'm bending a key now, but that's mind control, because 5,000 people couldn't all fall for that suggestion. I admit that if he is a fraud, I admit that saying you can find oil might be pushing a little bit. Why not just expose that? They exposed everything. I thought it was very, very bad. So that will give other people, especially people in the television industry, the idea that, if magicians are allowed to talk freely about this sort of thing, maybe we can. And then you get all these spin-off programs, Masked Magician, and people, especially on Facebook, just talking very freely about how things are done. It's a shame. So that's that. Actually, if anybody's wondering whether I mean all this, no, I don't. But I mean this about exposure. Keep our mouths shut. To say it's psychology is just as fraudulent as saying it's psychic. It's not psychology. It's it's very girly psychology.
I always ask this question, and I left it out actually. What advice? I hope we have some young magicians listening to this who are at the beginning of their career. What advice would you give them? Some real, just maybe if there's just one little tip, something that you think would really help.
Well, get an act. It amazes me that some of the magicians who've done well don't actually have an act. This seems extraordinary to me. It's the first thing you do. You have a 45-minute act. And then you want to do close-up magic, fine. But now you've got a situation where people are entertaining at functions doing a bit of close-up. And the organisers say, can you get up and do 20 minutes? Oh yeah. So they just take their sponge balls and do the sponge ball routine standing up.
Yeah.
You've got to have an act. Actually, I'm glad I'm not starting off now, because I wouldn't want to do close-up act. I wouldn't want to go around bars or wine bars doing it. I want to do an act, but I suppose there's not a lot of opportunities for a stage act. I don't know, it's very difficult. I think that really I would get an act. Well, I'm contradicting myself now, aren't I? I'm saying get an act, but there aren't the opportunities. Maybe the best advice to a young man who wants to do magic professionally is don't. Do it as a lovely hobby. I think things have changed so much that it's very difficult, I think, unless you've got a strong act.
Amazingly, Pete Wardell said exactly the same thing on the first episode of this podcast.
What did he say?
Exactly what you just said,
What?
basically. Just leave it as a hobby.
Yeah, leave it as a hobby.
Enjoy it, because when you put the pressure on it to make a living from it, you sometimes lose the fun and the love of why you got into it in the first place.
It's a wonderful hobby, but yeah, okay.
It's brilliant. Graham, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. So much fun. Really appreciate it. Graham Jolley.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. I absolutely have to share this with you because it is so funny. After the podcast ended, I asked Graham if there was anything he wanted me to edit out of the podcast. And the great thing here is that the microphone was still recording. So I have his response here to that question. Here it is.
So, actually, that was rude of me about Robert Harbin and Thompson. Yeah,
I'll take that on.
I don't want to say that. Really.
Basically, of all the things you heard Graham say, the one thing he wanted me to remove was a comment about Robert Harbin. It was a joke which he made about him being on a cruise ship. It was very, very funny, but Graham has a lot of respect for Robert and requested that I remove it. It was on the drive home that I realised, of all the things you just heard Graham say about various magicians, the one comment he wanted me to delete was a reference to a magician who has been dead for 35 years. Graham Jolley, you are a legend. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. Thank you also to the Magic Circle for lending us a room where we recorded. Thank you also to his son who was there and helped the podcast run smoothly. I really appreciate you tuning in this week. We'll hopefully see you again next week.